All right, everybody, welcome back to episode number 3. My name's Cameron Day, joined by Mark Shives here in the barn. First and foremost, obviously, we did the giveaway. Wanted to go ahead and congratulate Evan Brown for winning the Beeline giveaway. We'll be in touch with you. I know Mark said he has your number, so you can go.
Evan, I mean that's nice to see Evan. Evan was a kid in here. Haven't got to see him in a while, but when you say a lion, Evan Brown is a hard working kid. Congrats, Evan.
Yeah, so we'll go ahead and get you the winnings and everything. So congratulations on that. But before we get started, a big announcement for next week's episode is we're going to have our first ever guest. The guest will be kind of shown throughout the week as a surprise. But it's a pretty good one. I know, very close to Mark. So going ahead and getting a new guest, and that will be shown on for like accolades and whatever. That's going to be on the Facebook and Instagram at the Be a Lion Foundation. But we're going to go ahead and start here. We're going to get into quickly coping with grief. Obviously, we've had some grief, and that's kind of why we started this whole podcast and whatnot. But we all do it in our own ways whenever we cope with grief. But throughout the process of this podcast, I feel like main question has been, even to me, has been how do you hold up whenever you're talking about the life events and everything that's happened, and how are you able to sit in front of a camera and talk about that? So I'm going to let Mark start here, and then I'll chip on in as we go.
You're right on the you. We've had a lot of people reach out, and this has allowed me to connect and hear from people that I had a person reach out this week that I had no idea, and my tech I didn't. They kept sending a friend, and I finally I read in, I realized, and she had a really nice thing of she was going through something, and we didn't know each other, and her questions and things were like every day, and I would like to be able to give an answer because I think each and every person is completely different in the process, and I think sometimes we're too proud. I know when we first went through it, we take responsibilities. Like I felt like when all this went down at first, I still had to be a person um, of strength, and then you forget to heal yourself. So it's a longer process, And you would have thought I learned those lessons over a lifetime with dad and mom and my best friend Joe, but you don't. And how do you cope with it? I think each and everybody's different, I, I I catch myself telling people when they ask me to talk to somebody, talk to people, therapeutic. And then I was a guy that didn't do that great with the therapeutic side of it, but I've never been a big time like talker, sit down and talk to somebody, but I've tried it. I don't think there's a right way to do it. I know that I spoke to somebody about triggers. It's Mother's Day weekend. That's a trigger for me. So you got to figure out each and every day or every time you go through something. Somebody today sent me a wonderful picture of a hunting picture, and Cannon and I are side by side. And I wasn't ready for the picture, but damn, am I thankful for the picture? But it threw me. And those are the moments I had to regroup. And we have our ways to do it and our ways not to. But I want people to understand that when we say coping, I don't. You watch water hit earth, and after a while, if you watch a stream, it gets deeper and it runs wider, and it becomes, the edges aren't as sharp as what they probably were before. And I think sometimes that's how I connect it. Growing up, you would see little streams, and they were probably sharper with rocks. And as you get older, and I think it's never leaving. It's how we embrace it. I think that's a word that sometimes you think, how the hell are you going to embrace grief? But when you have people around you or you're by yourself, I spent a lot of lonely nights processing grief, and I don't think I wish I could say that there's people that are experts and who would want that definition, but I think it's just a process of how we go about it. I think this is you and I's way of processing grief. We know the pain of it, and if we can get ahead of it with somebody else, because nobody should have to endure this type of shit, but it's life. It's what we've been, and uh, I've always thought of myself as an educator, whether you're a coach or a teacher or whoever you are. So if we can give a little blimp, I know I do a lot of walk. I did a lot of walking. I know you were a kid kind of like me, where I watched you kind of like disappear, and you would come back, and I would watch you, and you've gotten better with it. So everybody to each his own. You surrounded yourself with people. I was the exact opposite, and I tried to get away. I
Yeah.
had a strong nucleus. Your mom was right there, so it was one of those things where I knew we had ways to bounce back and forth. But I watched you, you know, and that's hard to watch. Watching your kids is a painful process.
Yeah, and I think obviously we've talked about you going through grief early on with like your roommate, your dad, your mom, but going with grief and still having to be a parent at the end of the day, I think was maybe a new challenge for you since you still had to come home and be a parent to Kata and to me and my sister. So was that a new challenge as well?
I'll tell you what a big thing was in my challenge was I lost a son, but people forgot that that night I also lost two really close kids that I was, and they were players of mine. They were, so it was a very bizarre process. And I try to sit back. I've always been a person to sit back and watch and learn. And I got strength from watching Kelly and watching how she did things and processing stuff like that. But I think to each his own and to the process of it. But when somebody says, "How do you cope?" I like to think of it as it starts at second by second, and we get minute by minute. But I don't really love the word cope because I try to make sure that if I have a story and somebody has a story of Cannon or my mom or my dad or whoever, I had Denny Michael was a major factor in my life. So sometimes I think we think that it's coping is just our family when that's not true, and I think we all the word embrace is I try to take the good and not let it affect my daily life of the bad. And I also know that we've said this on the first episode. Everybody's going through shit, and I don't let my coping affect your day. And like that was something that I think that but there is days where it takes me down, and I understand that. And I watch my daughter fight it, and and she so if she's having a day, then I might have a day, but my her moment's not as important as my moment, and I think sometimes, but we all have to embrace and make sure that we know that our time is important and our healing is just as important. Like I wanted you to heal, and I wanted Kata to heal, but if I wasn't trying to heal, then maybe I'm not there, and you two are going through it again. So I didn't. I think sometimes you just gotta, you know, minute by minute, second by second, whatever it takes for you to get through that next process. Because as you're seeing here, there is some light on the other side, and now we have a desire to help the next. Which I don't want to be a person of that, but it's life, and I know that's coming, and I want to maybe have a little part in the healing of somebody else.
Yeah, and like you said, like whenever I went to school, I surrounded myself with friends, but also too, I think like whenever being younger, like it almost didn't seem real or anything. So like I kind of would get caught up to, and I started to realize, hey, like if I start keep pushing this away, then it all hits me hard at once. So not avoiding it at all throughout everyday life was something I learned, but just embracing it almost like whenever I see the 11, just embrace it. Just learning to embrace it
That was a big hit last week.
rather than, oh, what?
We brought up the 11 and how we look at a number,
Yeah.
and then people started to reach out and explain, of things that they did. And one person told me that an animal, when she sees an animal, it reminded her, and so
Yeah, I know.
that's part of it.
Yeah, even with my mom's mom, like the thing was with our grandmothers, the deer. Anytime you see doe and a multiple doe, that was their thing. So you find little niches and then you learn to embrace it. But you never really know how to deal with something like that, especially whenever it happens so sudden and everything. But so we're gonna go ahead and move on from that to obviously it's getting nice out. Pools are starting to open, everything. It's the middle of baseball season now, and there's the lovely debate between Little League and travel ball. And no, everybody seems to think they have an answer, but no one really does. So I know we touched on it first in the first episode a little bit, just really what will value it more. But now you're starting to see Little Leagues, which I didn't even know until we just had a tournament this weekend. I didn't even know that my Little League and another Little League were combined. So you're starting to see Little Leagues kind of fall through the cracks and all that. So asking your opinion on everything, because I think a lot of people value, obviously there's good values that come out of it, but then they want their kids to have fun in Little League. But as you're starting to see it, unfortunately, the competition's almost gone to absolutely nothing at Little Leagues. So what's your opinion or like your outlook on the whole Little League and travel ball debate?
Well, first of all, fuck a pool.
Yeah.
We opened up ours this week. The hose blew off. I've had that water guy over here 4 times. Get a pool, get a pool. Well, we got one, and they are headaches. They're nice, but they are headaches. So that's my little
They are
tidbit on a
nice.
pool. But um, little league, travel ball, man, that's a touchy subject. Luck, I've seen a little bit of everything. I think the one thing that drives me crazy with the little league theory in small town America is I get a lot of, well, don't you want them to have what you did? No, no, I do not, because that times have changed, and I have got to see both sides of it, and it's not somebody's responsibility to keep something afloat for somebody else. I was at a place one time, and a guy hit me with, "Don't you want your kid to go through what we did in high school?" No. Why would I want that? We weren't, just because we had a good time doesn't mean that's the time I want my child to have. You know, um, quick tidbit on that: you go to have a buddies right now, and there are little leagues across the United States that are highly competitive. So when we're talking little leagues right now, you got to make sure when you say little leagues, if you're talking about a little league that has 50 kids in it, and you go over there and there's only 2 kids in the league that can throw a strike or that has a velocity on the ball, and you got 3 kids that are really good. Why is their responsibility? And the age old dream is, are they going to the Little League World Series? If that is the ultimate goal of a Little League, then I don't want to hear the shit that Little League is concerned about the development of a kid, when the truth of the matter is are worried about the All-Star team and who is going to be on the All-Star team, who's coaching the All-Star team, things like that. I heard recently you can't even have a damn bat on deck. So where some of that makes you scratch your head. If you have 12 kids on a team and the other team has 12 kids on a team and all 12 of them are really good players, then that's a highly competitive game. Here's the part that I get a little sour with on the debate that gets, in my opinion, overlooked. If I can have 2 practices a week with a group of 9-year-olds that are pretty good athletes, and we do that for three times a year, we only play 5 games on the weekend. Nobody pitches twice. Everybody has a kind of a plan of development. What are you getting more out of? A person or a coach, if you can find them, that understands the development of the kid, hitting in the ground balls, teaching them how to catch a fly ball, how to move your feet, what is the responsibility of your arm care throughout the week, getting quality batting practice, watching guys throw, getting to see those guys if you go live BP. How do you not want to be part of something like that? Now, is it getting watered down? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the harder part of that is when you watch or see let's say, an 11-year-old goes on Thursday night and pitches because his Little League coach drafted him in the first round, and he throws 65, 70 pitches. He takes Friday off and doesn't touch a ball, so now you got muscular tightness. And then he goes and plays shortstop Saturday, 8 o'clock in the morning, not a proper warm-up. Plays another game, now he's dehydrated. And then Sunday they throw him 90 pitches. Okay, that I also have a problem with, because that's not good for the development of a kid. Are we the guru on this? No, but what gets lost in the debate of Little League and is whose responsibility is it? Was it your responsibility to carry your Little League just because you were the best player?
No.
And back then, that's all you had.
Yeah.
So you only had certain options, right? Now you have other options. We don't just buy a car at the local car shop now. We can go to Car Guru, wherever, and you can. So I think that if it's your kid and you want to send him to a private school because he scored off the charts on a math test, does that mean that the small town that you took him out of should hold that against you?
No.
Now, if you're at Tamiami Park in Miami and that's an ungodly Little League, why would you pull them out if you can get all that quality in 1 week? So it's an ongoing debate, but what gets lost in it? How are we developing the kid that wants to play the game?
Yeah, and I was just going to go ahead and ask you, obviously. I think a lot of people, too, see it as, oh, well, my kid's playing twice, so he's getting all these reps and all that. But I also think you hear the term quality over quantity, and I think that goes to show, because if you're stepping in the batter's box and, yeah, it's 50 miles an hour, you can swing a pitch above your head, hit it out, what does that really benefit you whenever you become a 16-year-old and a prospect? You're not going to be really a prospect then. So how much how much do people overlook really the development of their kid because they want to go ahead and have that Little League All-Star or their travel ball guru and everything?
Well, I think sometimes we listen to the focus of, like you just said, how many games did you play? You could play 5 games this weekend in a travel ball setting, or you can play 3 games in Little League. How many at bats did your kid get? And this is the part that's the kicker. If you play 2 in Little League and 5 on the, it's too much for a 10, 12-year-old kid. And then when did they develop their arm? Were they on a program? When did they just get ground balls? When did they get good quality batting practice? Because that shit that happens before a travel game, that's not quality batting practice. That's get your swings in, the coach is running around. Now, if you go to a practice if the kid gets 50, 60 ground balls, they're turning 2, they're understanding, and you're surrounding them with higher learning, how do you have an argument with that? I love my dad. He was my hero growing up. I thought he knew everything. And as I got older and I actually learned the game, only thing my dad taught me was when you get out of that car, you better not be upset and balling around if you strike out. Bust your ass, run through a wall. That's the things my dad taught me. If you're asking me, did my dad understand any of the theoretical approach? No. But why would he have known that? He was basically around here, you're self-taught.
Yeah.
Till you got to a certain age. People made it. What's the age? If a guy got to the minor leagues around here, he immediately was a guru.
Yeah.
What if he got there off of sheer talent? And that's any sport. That's anything. And now the problem is with all this shit is this thing right here. You got guys now that'll set. My thing is in here. If I can sit and watch a guy teach pitching on here for a year, then if I sit and watch a guy do a fucking elbow surgery, does that make me an elbow surgeon?
No.
But you're trusting your kid with a guy like that who thinks he's a guru. Do you think any of these guys on here are giving you their final tips?
No.
No.
And I think what really you can kind of tell is immediately whenever somebody kind of talks about whenever they start getting into lessons, if the only thing they have to show for them is just, oh, I played here.
Or they publicize through the kid.
Yeah.
Oh, I had this kid, so that makes me the guru. Like 90. I told you when I was Team USA, the 16U coach, 15U national team. That was the easiest job I had in my entire life. Right. I never posted that. I forget how many big leaguers was on that team. Does that mean I coached them all because they're big leaguers?
No.
I was only with them for 3 weeks. I didn't have to do anything. I made sure they didn't go over a pitch count. I made sure we didn't abuse their arms because that was the future of America's pastime. And not, I didn't post on Twitter, working with such and such tonight, or got to do this with this guy, or hey, let's take some pictures, because it wasn't going to change who I was here. And but a lot of times that's what you're seeing. And that just because I worked with those guys, I'm going to be honest with you, that didn't make me a better coach at all.
Yeah.
Because what was I learning from that other than you ain't got to do anything here? Sometimes I think what's a high A ball coach doing if that guy's on the bump?
Yeah.
That's a pretty easy night for you.
Yeah. And so obviously we were talking about development, but I feel like routine is very overlooked as just, especially at a young age. A lot of people think, hey, they're kids, like it's fine, like they didn't throw today, whatever. How important is a routine whenever they're 9 or 10 in the process of making them who they want to be at like 14 to 16?
When we tell kids, the number one thing we tell them is, hey, go out and get loose, which to me is the most asinine thing, because to me, catch is the most important thing a kid does from the age of like 7 to 10 or to 11. What are they feeling? What does the arm look like? If you don't fix it then it becomes a habit. Now, some habits you can get rid of, like Reggie Miller shoots a basketball completely wrong.
Yeah.
But Reggie Miller's going to go down as one of the greatest shooters of all time through repetition. Now, are we only using Reggie Miller? Because I've seen a lot of bad jump shots that don't go in. So he's a freak of those things. But I think routine and understanding arm care is a major overlooked thing. Hey, when we talk about it, I mean, I did Little League for 5 years. I've went over in Little League. I don't see a ton of arm care being stressed and certain things. And if you are teaching arm care, it better be right, because or if not, you're adding stress. So routines and like, what is it? I was watching a guy talk the other day. We talked in here about takes. You got a kid on deck. Do we stress take? Or is he taking the product? There's a lot of things that can be stressed that are overlooked, because let's face it, at the end of the game, and you're just starting to coach, and you come in and you're like, at the end of the day, it's the job and the responsibility of, because I ask this a lot of times, who taught you that? And what the kid does every time, sells out that person. How many times I've had kids throw their Little League coach or their junior league coach or whatever, they chuck them, especially as they get older. So yes, routine's important. Pre arm care, post arm care, your catch. What is today? How many guys when you were growing up said, "Hey, what is your throwing today?" You got 12. You got 12 kids. You got 7 arms. Not every kid. If you train every kid for Monday, who pitches Friday? There's a lot that gets overlooked in the theoretical approach of preparation. And then, we're going to touch on high school baseball, but from the first day to the last day, you're trying to line up your stuff. So making sure your guy is peaking at the right time. I always say this around here. You're going to see a lot of no-hitters thrown in the first 2 weeks. And you're going to see a lot of sore arms after that. And then if your arm is sore the third week, well, you're in recovery mode. You're not in progression mode.
Yeah, and we were going on routine, and obviously we were talking about, because there's crazy ass parents out there. But how about the parents that try to do too much for their kids and don't get out of the way?
And that's a tough subject because you also got that parent. It's hard to say that because you got parents that just want the best for their kid.
Right.
And I get that. But you also got a parent, I was at a game one time and you got the dad standing beside the dugout. Now, once I did my background check, the dad never played.
Yeah.
Now, when did he become, so you got to deal with that. And then I know this, I was this guy. I was done. If I have to set and headbutt against a dad over and over, we had a really good arm one time, and it was the dad. You know what I said? Move on. It wasn't worth that. And it's sad to watch, and it's sometimes, but, it's a tough job as a coach because you're trying to keep a kid under your wing. But sometimes that parent can just ruin it. And I have seen it. Can a parent?
Well, and there's only so much a coach can do whenever you really only have 2 hours, say 2 times a week, compared to obviously you're not winning compared to. And a dad, like you said, your dad's your hero. I look up to my dad. We all look up to our parents and everything. So, of that regard, it's hard to win, and it takes like the parents that sit there and let the coaches do whatever. It takes a lot to do that because at the end of the day, that is your kid. And so to do that, I give respect to parents that go ahead and do that and just let their kid be them, and in their own time, we'll say our
And
pieces.
if you can't, I used to catch myself and people. I'd stand way out when it was basketball and I wasn't coaching. I set up in the bleacher. Wasn't my time, and it's no different than It's no wonder in public education or private you keep the parents outside the doors.
Yeah.
That's one of the venues where guess what, the parents are constantly around.
Yeah, and they can, and like you said, it is a touchy subject because parents do care and all that, but there's a certain point where caring goes too far and you're just being a disturbance. Because whenever your kid goes ahead and strikes out or he makes an error, if you see kids just look over straight to
Immediately.
Straight to the bleachers because they're worried about what their parents thinking. Or you have, if their kid's crying on the bench because they struck out, their parent will come on over to the fence and comfort them. So
I used to always crack up at the dads that I would watch in travel ball as I was coaching older kids, and when the kid would swing, the dad would jump, trying to man. And I'd sit to myself and think, "You're shitting me right now. That's where you're at as a parent. Set your ass down. If you got to sit on your hands, sit on your hands. But you don't know who's sitting over there." And I used to sit and scout and be like, "You're kidding me." So that's the pressure that's going on nonstop with So what did you expect? Then translate that to the house.
Yeah.
That kid didn't go catch a break. And does he really even love the game, or she love the game, or and how far are you going to go?
Or are you just trying to live it through?
A lot to read through watching a parent when you're making and that's the part colleges are making decisions on parents as well.
Well, yeah, and I told you the story, but I know my mom being back there, she's making sure the camera's going. We're testing out a new camera or whatever. But she saw whenever my sister was going to all the camps, a girl badmouth her mom or whatever. The mom was kind of crazy. But they were going to go ahead and offer her. But just because the interaction between her and her mom scratched her right off the list. And it was to a Power 5 school or Power 4 now. So just going off that, no matter how good you are, no college wants to deal with a crazy ass parent.
You just watched the NFL draft. We all know what happened there.
Yeah, you look at that. The NFL draft.
Simple as that.
Can show you that. And obviously, and that's with a prime father figure and legendary Hall of Famer Deion Sanders. And you just saw how the NFL kind of went and blackballed them in the draft. And we saw, and it's no debate on that because why would Cleveland go ahead and trade up in the 5th round when they took a quarterback in the 3rd round?
And personalities shared and interviews. A lot goes into it at the end that you better be prepared for. And too late to make an excuse then.
Yeah, so now we're going to get into our little sports segment, but obviously we're in the midst of baseball season, so I want to go ahead. I had originally Mark's money line picked out, but Mark said he's not too good at picking that, so he doesn't want to be at fault of anything.
I got two. Yeah, I'm not doing a bunch of teams. I suck at
Yeah.
gambling.
So I'm going to let Mark go with baseball. Do you have your World Series?
If you're asking me who I like in the World Series, I'm not saying the Dodgers. I like the Phillies. I like their experience. I like their staff. I think they got a pure number one that can go in, into a hostile environment and win. And I like their lineup. And as much as people don't like Harper, when it's playoff time, that dude comes to another level.
You know who's Harper's number one fan?
Yeah, Megan.
My mom.
Yeah, she loves him.
Yeah, loves Bryce Harper
Yeah.
with a passion.
And then I like the Tigers this year. I kind of like. I liked how last year they got a little experience. If Scooble stays healthy, I like their pen. They're young. I kind of like the rookie arm they brought up. My heart is with Kansas City, but I just think that if they can put up enough runs, I don't see the Yankees are the Yankees, but
Well, the Yankees don't have Garrett Cole either. They don't
they
have
don't
their
have
ace.
a light. Now here's the problem: making it early. Who the hell are they going to go out and buy and get and trade and do all this with? But if I had to say today, I'm going to roll with the Phillies and the Tigers, and I would kind of like to see that play at World Series.
Yeah, and I'd like to sit here and say the Orioles, but that ain't happening.
Yeah,
so,
gonna help you with
but
that.
I think probably going on baseball, I think maybe the most impressive all season and kind of most impressive turnaround from the Chicago Cubs have done an amazing job because last year they had arms and all they really needed was they had young talent, but they go out and get Tucker, they go out and get some vets, and that team looks completely different.
I like I said, I'm not a guy that throws this out, but I coached Kyle Tucker, and I watched that kid. And if you have a young kid that's looking for a role model, Kyle Tucker is just sit and watch that guy. He comes to work, he goes home. He's got one of the purest swings I've ever seen. He's a true gentleman of the game. He keeps the game simple. You don't see Tuck with a bunch of stuff on. We had Nico Horner, and he's a dog. And you put guys like that in, and you're right. The Chicago Cubs are to be reckoned with. And is that a team I'd like to see win it? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they're going to be around for a while if they make the decision on Tuck.
Yeah.
They're going to have to pay him.
Yeah, but if they pay him, then you get your a big time veteran there who's still in his prime. He reminds me of a guy that I think just gets overlooked is Freddie Freeman.
Well, there's another guy that if you got a kid and he doesn't like Freddie Freeman, you're teaching. Freddie Freeman reeks of baseball,
and
man.
professionalism.
Yes, and he's everything you wish. And I will guarantee you that I don't know this, but I'm going to go out on a ledge and bet that Freddie Freeman's dad wasn't over yelling and losing his mind when Fred. Those are the kind of things I know Tucker's wasn't. I watched how they carried themselves. So apple don't fall far from the tree with things like that. And if you ever watch Freddie around his kids, say no more.
My favorite video all the time is whenever he sees the kid wearing
Halloween
his jersey on Halloween, and he goes up, and the kid has no idea at first, then he realizes.
Yeah.
But just like the way he carries himself, family guy, and all of that. Going in, obviously, we were talking about baseball with World Series, but now we're going to get in, obviously, high school season, and the local high schools are starting playoffs, softball, baseball, everything. So what makes that so unique? All the towns coming together, and it still has that small town feel to it, and you see a community come together. Obviously, whenever you've won a state championship, I've been a part of. You see a small town, everybody comes out of their houses after you win, fire trucks, everything. But even if you don't win, you see communities coming together. What makes it so unique?
Well, I think I got to see it in Miami, and it's a different theory down there. But when it's go time, it's go time, and I think the big thing is it's colors.
Yeah.
Your school colors and your alma mater, and people want to be part of it, and you get to see the old heads. And I know when we first started, there wasn't much of a crowd, and then over the years we started to develop, and you would see I'd be walking in a gas station, and an old guy would come over and be like, "Hey man, I went to your game," and there's nothing better than when you get on a bus or that they come to your field, and I think one of the big things is you have to establish a culture. Everybody has a flash in the pan. So there's some teams that might be terrible for 5, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, and then boom, they run into a 3-year prime. But to have a culture that you establish and you go in and then you watch the maturation process, and you see a young kid that becomes a leader, or a kid that groomed himself and he gets his turn. But when I've coached a lot of places, and I've got to put my feet in the soil in foreign ground, there was never a place in my lifetime that I felt was a better place to watch the American flag wave in the air in the mountains behind a small town of Clear Spring. That to me was the best place I ever stood and listened to the national anthem. And to take that and then go into battle and another group, and I know when I coached, I wanted us to be hated, not because of what was said, but what we do to you. And I thought, and that was a culture, you want it. And if I'm in your mouth and I'm in your head, I got real estate. And I kind of wanted real estate because that was and I wanted that to be understood. But I think 20 years from now, if I'm still around and I would go up to that field, I want to see the same, and that's a culture. Now we talked about Little League and you say, well, in high school, guess what? I only kept 12 to 15 kids. I wasn't keeping cut bait. So you had to bust your ass and you had to work. And those are kids, and you had to have a character. And then on a good day, two teams match up. They're battle tested. And then you see everybody. I know we took buses of kids. We had people come out. And it wasn't a moment for me because my moment had passed, but it was a moment that I know I embraced it. In the moment, and that's Cannon's post. Cannon threw the last pitch in the state championship game as a freshman. And he shook me on that pitch because it wasn't the pitch I called. But I watched his moment, and then I kind of circled around, and I watched everybody's moment. And then I watched us come home that night, and we ate at a restaurant here in town, at a small little restaurant, and they put it on the house. They wanted us to eat that night. And the woman that was a friend of mine growing up, she was the waitress. She made it perfect because she had a moment with us. We got to share it with things that the bus driver, and how many times in life do you get to do anything in your life where you get to have a moment and all of us are part of it? Grandparents, step-parents, moms, uncles, cousins, waitresses, everybody got to share it. And you know what? Sometimes in towns, we had a very bad moment in our town, but we also those kids gave our town, we were it
Yeah.
for that month.
And I also feel like, whenever like the bad things happen in town, those good times kind of get overlooked. And so I think those should kind of overshadow, remember those good times and remember like everything that was. Because Cannon obviously throwing out the state championship game, like his pose wouldn't have had that without that moment.
It's what builds you. It's
Yeah.
what, I know we lost the state championship when I was a kid, but character's not handed to you. It's built inside of you. And I was lucky to get to live in a lot of big cities, but in a lot of small ones. But my people ask me on that question about coping and grief. I'm from fucking small town America. We're built a little different, and that's what we are. And if we got to lead it, we lead it. And these guys that are going into battle this week and next week for girls for baseball and softball and tennis and track, embrace your moment. Go get it. And if you don't get it, give it what you have because the next group coming up is going to remember it. And you might have to come back. And I know if you come back and tell them you were this close and you didn't, but that's the beauty of it. And good luck to all the teams. I hope you have a safe playoff run and a strong playoff run. But I'm pulling for the blue and gold.
Yeah, and going with that, obviously, you may not have your moment in the playoffs or state championship, whenever it is, but like I didn't have a single moment in high school, and then I didn't get my moment until my last year of college. I got a moment, so like
but you stayed hungry. You stayed hungry.
Stay with the process, and even if you go ahead, not everybody's going to win a state championship.
No.
But let that, if you lose or you don't have your moment, let that fuel it, and then you'll get your moment. Everything kind of pans out, and I think it's hard to see that because whenever I was in high school, I didn't see that happening or whatever at a time. But then you just stay, like you say, stay the course with it, and you get your time.
Well, and you don't realize till it's past. When I'm 51 years old, and I had a buddy that when Cannon passed, we reconnected, and we were just athletes together. But he was a brother of mine then in 1988 to 92, and he's still a brother of mine. And we didn't win. We lost in the state finals. So guess what? You never know what you think you lost, what you actually gained, because at the end of your trip, it's a victory of your life, and I think that gets overlooked. But a lot going to happen in the next 2 weeks that's good for kids, and it's good for the kids and the parents. Let the kids have it. Let the kids have it.
Yeah, and like he said, roll Blazers, but it's time for everybody's favorite part. Mark's going to move his mic up close so everybody can hear him nice and good. Mark's Minute, everybody's favorite.
Yeah.
It was between Mark's Minute and Mark's Money Line, but we came with the Mark's Minute. It's been a hit. So I think he's going to go off with Mother's Day
Yep.
happening this weekend.
Big,
So
one of these things we talked about coping, and I said, Mother's Day is one of those things. But I wanted to touch on something this week with moms sometimes get overlooked. So I want the moms to know that at my age, I realized that how we perceive a mom to what a mom is actually in our life, and this is from my experience. I lost my mom. I know the trip of my mom. I know my mom, and at times growing up, was not heard in our home until my dad was done. I can tell you, I grew up with you wait till your dad gets home, and all those kind of things. But after my dad passed very quick, we were still young and we needed to be finished. And my mom took a role. She didn't become a dad. She stayed the course of a mom. But as I got older, I realized that my mom brought something to our family that I overlooked. I look at men growing up, they were burly. My dad hunted, he fished, he was the little league coach. I remember one time at a restaurant, he smacked the guy around because the guy was saying the F word. That's what I thought a man did. And that's why I thought a woman at the time growing up was not as strong as a man. I was completely wrong in that whole process of life. And I watched my mom take over and do shit no man could do. And I've seen women around here pick up and do shit no man could do. Because it's hard to give a motherly love and at the same time be a stern soul that my dad wouldn't have been able to do. My dad would have never been able to tell me to not come home, to stay my course. He would have said, to hell with that. So I realized there was a time in my life. So I'll tell you, my mom, when she passed, I took her pocketbook home and I opened it up a couple days later and there was a $20 bill in it. And I can remember all the times that I would be running around and I would run up to my mom because the guys were going out or I needed something to eat. And she would say, I don't have a lot, here's a 20. That 20 is still in my mom's pocketbook at the house. And I never said, like, thank you. And it pisses me off because it's a weekend that I'll go up this weekend and I'll say thank you, but she's not going to say anything back. But I'll tell you real quick a story. When mom was passing, she was on a ventilator. I had to wait for her to get her organs lined up to where they were going to go and what we were going to do. So I had a moment where it was just me and her. The nurse was checking things. And the nurse said, hey, she can hear you, which to this day, I don't know if she did or not. And this is my lesson to you. I didn't say nothing but, hey, Mom, thank you. And an endearing thank you. So for a guy that's missed it twice, because I didn't say it to my damn dad, and I had to say it in a moment like that, and then I wished I would have said it then. So if you take anything from a guy with many experiences of sit your mom down on Sunday and a thank you. I say this a lot of times, I love you. Hey, I love you. And we say it on the phone, and that's one of those words. But I never, ever just set my mom down as I got older and said, thank you for the 20 you gave me when you didn't have it. Thank you for not eating the dinner when my friends came in. Thank you for the shit you did that nobody understood. Thank you for being one bad bitch that I didn't appreciate till it was too late. So to all the mothers out there, thank you. And thank you for what you do and who you are. Happy Mother's Day.
Yeah, going off that, obviously, whenever you're a kid, like, you don't really understand the full value of what moms fully do.
No.
And then, like, as I get older, now that I'm moving into
You gotta
places,
go one.
doing stuff like that, you start to see, like, okay, I think my issues are running up and down, but, like, I don't have 2 kids I'm worrying about or anything like that, or what they really, truly do until you start getting older. But then that's the maturation process. And with everything, like, starting to see the reality of what they really do.
Cool.
And with it being Mother's Day, so since my mom's here, thank you and love you. Happy Mother's Day, since it's coming out on Mother's Day. But we're going to get on to our last segment, closing segment, is going to be school's almost out, obviously. And around this time, all kids go crazy. Testing, sports, it's about to be summer, all that. But obviously, you say stay the course. What's your kind of remarks to kids that kind of, at the end of the school year, kind of blow it off or, like, not take it as serious and don't finish the process?
Well, you know what the biggest thing is your character is who you are. To a young kid, it's tough to grab and understand that. But let's talk to a certain group. Let's talk to high school kids. This is your character time. senior skip days, senior pranks. Don't make a mistake that you're going to be known for, that you don't want to be known for, or that you are labeled. And understand this. I can appreciate now the testing side of things. Do I agree with all this testing shit? Absolutely not. But if it's what you're asked to do, we preach stay the course. Your education is your education, and sometimes we overlook it. But my biggest tip over the last month, respect yourself. Respect the people that have been in this course with you. The first day most of you went to school, your mother had you dressed to the nines. Finish out that process. Don't look like a dumbass at graduation. Don't do something stupid that you want to be known for that you're not. Senior pranks audit, they're great, they're funny, they're needed, and but don't take it to a level that you'll regret. And this is it. The greatest time of your life is high school. Cam's graduating from Hood, and I know I've only been in the process a little bit. It's a proud day. It's a day that we do baccalaureates and we do all this, but at the end it goes quick. And I'll leave you with that. On the respect factor and all this. You're looking at a guy that's kid didn't get to walk the stage. You're looking at a guy that's kid. I haven't went to one senior night of basketball, soccer, or baseball because he wasn't there. And we're not going to make it a sad day when there's seniors that needed to graduate. It's their moment. It's their time. I want you to embrace it because this is the greatest time of your life. The moment you walk off that stage, you're no longer in the school. You are now a adult. And if anybody tells you adulting is fun, you learned that the hard way.
Hey, I'm pretty good at it.
Yeah, you're at the point of doing hamburger now, knowing how to brown it. So you're almost there. But that's just the part of it that we're all learning. So embrace it. Have fun with it. Stay classy and, enjoy it.
Yeah, and obviously I just want to say something with Mother's Day, go ahead, obviously, not just, I feel like everybody goes ahead on Mother's Day and makes it some big thing, but I know you're going to butt heads with your mom. You're going to have those moments. But instead, just on Mother's Day, make it at least once a week. Just show you care about your mom. She's working, you're working, wherever you're at in life. Just show it a little more on Mother's Day. Obviously, Mother's Day, get her something nice and really embody what she's done for you. But make it 365 days a year where you really respect your mom. Don't get off the phone without saying love you because you never know when the last I love you is. And I think that's what I've kind of learned with everything. I had a friend, I got off the phone with one of my close friends, and I had another friend with me. I told my friend, hey, love you, because I haven't seen him. It was Eric Bender. He's down in Florida. Jesse Hart. He's been in Germany. And they were like, you say I love you to everybody? And ever since everything happened to us, I say I love you to everybody, no matter who it is, because you never know. They may be going through something rough, and that just may be the one thing, but just little things like that.
And it's easier to cope when you know you've closed.
Yeah.
When you got things you at least know you closed, and they knew where you were at.
Yeah.
Part of coping.
Yeah. So, and because now, since I've been through it, I realize that you never know when your last I love you is. You never know if you get off the phone with your mom, your last I love you. So just enjoy and make Mother's Day great as it should be, but make it 365 days a year for both your dad and your mom. And if it's not your mom, whoever's raising you, it doesn't have to be your true mom or dad. Whether it's your grandparents, a sibling, or whatever it is, just show your love for them 365 days a year instead of just one day a year. But going off of that, like I said, next week we're going to have our first ever guest, and we're looking at going ahead each week having at least either a guest or a call-in. So looking at that, so stay tuned. Again, stay tuned to Be a Lion Foundation on Facebook and Instagram. But do you have anything to close out on?
Nope.
Other than that, live your life like a lion and be a lion, and we'll see you in a week, or not this Sunday, not the next Sunday, the next Sunday after that. All right, we'll see you.